Good afternoon. I'm Eleanor Levy, the Folk Arts Program Manager at Arts Mid-Hudson, and I'm here with Elva Corbaton, who works here at the Poughkeepsie Public Library. And today we are presenting Long Live the Dead, a talk about the history and meaning of Dia de los Muertos, brought to you by Deirdre Cornell, who is well known in the community. She's going to give the talk first in English and then in Spanish, which is very exciting, so we're not going back and forth.
Right.
And so we're all really looking forward to this. This is our third set of programming here at the library. We have a mask workshop coming up on Thursday. There might still be room. Get a hold of Elva. And next Saturday will be, I don't think it'll be anything in person, but we will be live streaming cooking demonstrations. In addition, you should come to the library and take a look at our beautiful altars or ofrendas, which were built by Veronica and Pedro Jimenez. And there is an altar on every floor, and especially for the kids, we have an altar for pets in front of the children's room. In addition, you don't want to miss all of the altars or ofrendas that are along Main Street. So come here, pick up a passport, and then start at ABC Latino and work your way down to La Cabanita, and in between, there are 8 more ofrendas to experience. And if you take your passport and you go in, they will give you a stamp. We also ask that you please support these wonderful businesses.
Yes.
And then when you come back with a passport full of stamps, we'll give you a certificate. So thank you. This is the first time Elva and I have worked together, and we don't think it'll be the last, certainly, for Dia de los Muertos, but we're so excited that we could bring you all of this programming.
Yes, Thank you so much. So let's just welcome Deirdre. Thank you so much for accepting to be here with us and explain us about this beautiful, beautiful tradition for all my community, the Hispanic community. So I'm so proud of that. And so yes, please, we encourage you to visit all the altars. Yesterday I was at Cocina Oaxaqueña, and they have a beautiful, beautiful altar. So, and come to the library. These altars are going to be just from November 1st to November 7th. So it's not
a long time. I saw Giselle's altar yesterday, and I do have a plan to visit every altar this week.
Yes, tomorrow. I'm going to do that tomorrow. So everyone, if someone wants to join me tomorrow at 11 a.m., I'm going to do a tour from here, from the library. Here from the library, we have 5 altars. 5 altars, yes, 5 altares de Muerto. And from here, I'm going to visit 11 businesses.
Excellent.
Yes. So, well, let's go to. Thank you, Deirdre.
Okay. How is the sound? Can you hear me? Is it recording okay? Okay, good. All right, well, let's start by saying, que vivan los muertos, que vivan.
Que vivan.
Vivan, vivan. Okay. So thank you so much, Elva, and thank you for having me at Adrian's Poughkeepsie Public Library. It's wonderful to be here, wonderful to get to share about Los Días de los Muertos, the Days of the Dead. And we're going to talk a lot today about the experience of Los Días de los Muertos, the Days of the Dead, okay? And I wanted to let everyone know that for my undergraduate degree, I had studied anthropology. And I loved learning about different cultures. For my master's degree, I studied theology in Berkeley, California. And there my specialization was religion and culture. So I've always wanted to know how communities express their faith and their values and their deepest beliefs. And Days of the Dead, Los Días de los Muertos, is the perfect example, because it's not just an academic subject, it's something that people practice. It's a living tradition. So when you go and you visit those altares, the altars in the community, you're seeing something that people are practicing. They're putting something into practice. It's not just something that's up here, but it's something that people live and feel and experience. And when I was younger, I had the amazing experience with my husband, who's here present, and with our daughter here present. We had the chance to live in Mexico. And living in Oaxaca for 3 years, which is a state in the south, we got to know a lot of what some of the people in Poughkeepsie experience, because a lot of the Mexican community in Poughkeepsie is from the same state, the state of Oaxaca. So it's a wonderful privilege for me to be able to share with you. Now, I'm gonna go back to those years, and if you have children, some of us here have children, and who go through cross-cultural experiences, you know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? Sometimes the kids see things more clearly than the adults because they adapt more quickly. And sometimes they state the obvious, they tell it like it is. Now, when we came back from living in Mexico, from Oaxaca, where we were for 3 years, our children were still young, and we came back in the summer. So just a couple of months later, it was time for Halloween. It was this time of year. Our kids were in school, and their classmates were getting their costumes ready. And when you'd go to the store, there were these vampires and witches and axe murderers. And our youngest, or our third child came home, and he said, "I don't like Halloween. It's too scary. Why can't we have muertos instead?" So I think that sometimes the children state the obvious. They see what as adults maybe we just don't point it out. The Days of the Dead is not Halloween. It's different. So in comparison, we say, really honestly, if you look at Halloween, it's gruesome. You know, it tends, and it's obsessed with death and violence even. I have nothing against the kids dressing up. I like to see the kids dressed up. And believe me, I enjoy the candy. Who doesn't like candy? But it seems to get darker every year, doesn't it? It's very violent now. When you look at the Days of the Dead celebration, when you look at it from the outside, it might look similar in some ways. In some ways it does. I mean, you have the skulls and you have the presence of death, but it's very different. And with all due respect, Muertos is much more about imparting values and spiritual lessons, which Halloween doesn't. There's even a wholesome feeling to it because it's something that you celebrate in your family. It's very family and community oriented. So it's not focused on blood and gore and violence. It's a celebration, and as you see from the colors, it's very exuberant. It's an exuberant celebration of both life and death, both together. There's a whimsical quality. I mean, just look even at the faces, at the skeletons, how they're dressed up. There's a playfulness. It's colorful. There are bright colors, like the bright yellow marigolds and the papel picado. So here are marigolds, and outside, I believe I saw papel picado. You have the beautiful altar that's been done right here in the lobby of Poughkeepsie Library. There are charming verses and songs. It's just a fun time. And one thing that the kids love is the candy-shaped skulls. They're made out of melted sugar that get poured into molds and decorated with frosting and sequins. And in Oaxaca, the kids used to have the vendor put the name of a friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You can put someone's name on it and give it as a gift. So it's very whimsical and fun. Muertos is even comical. If you have ever seen calacas, and I'll show you some photos at the end of this, they are tiny comical scenarios of miniature skeletons, very small, depicted in everyday situations like a skeleton dentist and a patient in the dentist's chair, and maybe a wedding or a cowboy riding a horse. So those are also traditions that give a light quality to Muertos, not gruesome or scary, but very whimsical and fun. Of course, our kids also used to love the fact that they got several days off of school. I think now with COVID, the kids would love to go back to school because they're all tired of being out of school. But this was pre-COVID, and so they used to enjoy having the time off because there was so much to do. You have to get ready for the holiday. And the best would be when Muertos would fall close to, but not exactly on the weekend. So you would get what's called a bridge day, a puente, and you get an extra day off even. So the kids would love that because that would be really exciting for them. And whether it's a village, a tiny village, or a town, or maybe just a neighborhood in a city, there's definitely a sense that the whole community is getting ready because there are preparations that they have to make. And it's an event for the whole family and their friends, a time when people come together. And when we were in Oaxaca, our kids used to say that it kind of reminded them of Thanksgiving. You know how for Thanksgiving, there are special foods. People who are living away from home, they come home at that time. You're with your family, and you tend to have those conversations where you say, oh, I remember Aunt so-and-so, or you remember your elderly people who have passed. So it's rather similar. The days beforehand are time for house cleaning, getting everything ready, shopping, because there are special foods that you have to get. You have to get things that you plan to take to the graveyard when you're going to go visit the graves of your loved ones, or maybe to put on your altar at home. So similar to what we have right out here in the lobby, and similar to what people will be seeing if they do take the recorrido, the stopping at the different places to see the altars here in Poughkeepsie. There are beautifully arranged altars with so much meaning, so much significance. So people are getting ready for all of that. Now, one year we went to Puebla, because when we lived in Newburgh, you know, the community in Newburgh is mostly made up of people from sending villages in Mexico that are from the state of Puebla. So one year we went to Puebla, and that year we got there on November 2nd. And on that day, you could not find one tortilla for sale in the entire town because everyone had come home. So logically, in this town, the pan de muerto, the special bread, it was all sold out. The tortillas, they were all sold out. Why? Because so many people had come back from where they had emigrated to, whether it's within Mexico or wherever, that they had left the town, they had moved away, but for Muertos, they would come back. So there's definitely a sense of homecoming, of coming home. It's a time to be together. And this togetherness is not only for the living, but also for the dead. Que vivan los muertos, que vivan. In fact, if you think about it, the dead are actually the ones who brought everyone together. So they're there, and they're drawing everyone back home. Because their souls, it is believed, come home for an embrace. They come home to savor the foods that are put out on the altars, and to know that they are not forgotten. Muertos is about remembering our loved ones who passed, and knowing that they live on in our hearts. There's a saying, as long as someone is remembered, they're still alive. There's a sense of connection with the dead. That is the whole point of this celebration. And even though there are a lot of differences, I'd like to point out that throughout Mexico and throughout also parts of Central America, here in the southwest of the United States, Muertos is celebrated. There are a lot of differences depending on where you are, what community you're in. But really what they share is that from place to place, in essence, the Days of the Dead are about honoring that connection, that ongoing link that we have with our deceased loved ones. Now, if it's the first year that someone that we love has passed, someone in our family, neighbors and friends will make it a point to come and visit that house in some places it's traditional to bring a candle to that family to offer on the altar. And if family members are away, it's the first year, they'll make an extra special effort to come home for that year's Muertos celebration. So it really does serve to remind us that our loved ones are with us. And we say that they come back, we say that their spirits come back, but really if you think about it, they're always with us, right? It's just that we're taking these days to really be aware of it, to really be present to that reality. And in a few moments, we'll talk about some of the customs that make us really recall that. But first, I'd like to share some of the background and the origins of the Days of the Dead. Because a lot of traditions that make Los Días de los Muertos unique are drawn from indigenous customs, so the customs that belong to the native peoples of the Americas. Before the Spanish arrived, the indigenous peoples all over Mexico, during a certain time period, they used to make offerings to the dead. These offerings were for the souls who were on their way to the land of the dead, Mictlan, or if they were recently departed, they would come back at this time of year, and during those years, in those centuries, that was in August. So not the same date, but the same idea. The people burned incense and offered food and drink, especially those made from seeds, seeds being a symbol of life, and from corn. Corn, of course, the staple of life. These meals and beverages were supposed to help the dead on their journey, and also to appease any ill will that the spirits might have against the living. Some scholars also think that there would be animal or even human sacrifice offered if there were some important person who had passed, to avoid retribution in case that soul came back to take revenge. So there was that side of it. These customs are recorded in codices from the time of the conquest. However, it is hard to know accurately because the documents from that time are mostly concerned with conversion to Christianity. But what we can say with surety is that the indigenous customs became incorporated into the Catholic solemnities of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, November 1st and November 2nd. And we know what day is today?
November 1st.
It's November 1st. So for Catholics, it's actually, if it weren't Sunday, because Sunday's already a holy day of obligation, but it would be a day of obligation to go to Mass because it's a solemnity, it's an important day. And this is not only in Mexico, but that's all over the world. So Christians all over the world observe All Saints' Day on November 1st. And November 2nd, does anybody know what November 2nd is? Yes, thank you, Maripas. All Souls' Day. So November 1st, All Saints' Day, and November 2nd, All Souls' Day. But it's the indigenous customs, the customs that we see on the altar, the tradition of the altars, and the specific foods. That's what really gives this celebration its character and makes it Los Días de los Muertos. It makes them, these days, unique. It's the way that religion and culture go hand in hand. So as part of our creed, Catholics everywhere, we believe in the communion of saints. That is the belief in the unity of all souls, living and dead. But there are specific values and spirituality expressed and upheld and transmitted through the Days of the Dead. There's a willingness to coexist with and even make light of death as a way to remind us of the transience of life, the impermanence of life. There's the importance of the family and the community that is so emphasized. And natural objects are used as sacramental instruments capable of bringing us closer to our deceased loved ones. Now, if you think back to All Saints' Day in Europe, it also had pre-Christian roots. It came from Roman times, the times of the Romans, when the church wanted to make a day for the saints who didn't get their own feast day. Do you know that in the old days, there was a saint for every day? The calendar was made up of different saints' days. So March 19th, St. Joseph, or September 8th, the Virgin Mary, her birthday. So every day of the year basically had its own saint. Well, what about all of the martyrs and the saints that didn't get a day? So the idea for All Saints' Day was the Pope of that time, this was in the year 609 in the Common Era, the Pope of that time held a mass, a celebration for the Virgin Mary, but for all of the martyrs who maybe their names were not known, or maybe they were obscure. So that was a day that was supposed to be for all of the saints, for everyone. And that mass was held in the Pantheon, which is a former pagan temple. So there are some pre-Christian roots to All Saints' Day, just like how in Mexico the original feast was held in August. Well, this one was held in May, that's Mary's month, but later on the celebration was moved to November, because the whole month of November for Christians is the month when we remember our deceased loved ones. It's the month of the dead. Now, All Souls Day, November 2nd, it has got to be the most populous day of all, because on November 2nd, not only do you pray for the saints, but you pray for everybody. Everybody who needs our prayers, anyone, any soul that needs to have our prayers to get into heaven, basically. So All Saints Day, November 1st, but All Souls Day that goes hand in hand with it. It's this great equalizer when we basically are praying for everyone who's ever lived in history. Halloween is somewhat similar in the sense that in school, the children learn that Halloween comes from a Celtic celebration. The Celts in Ireland and other parts of Europe who celebrated their own festival for the dead in a different month, and those customs also got transferred to a new date, and that's where we get All Hallows Eve, which is Halloween, the night before All Saints' Day. So do you see the similarities? Yeah. Now, getting back to Mexico and other parts of Latin America and the southwest of the United States, for anthropologists, the Days of the Dead is an example of popular religiosity. That means the religion practiced by the people themselves. So the customs that are practiced and passed on by the people themselves, not because they're being told to do so by the official church, but because they find these customs authentic and meaningful, and so they put them into practice. Now, in theology, we take this a step further, and we say it is inculturation. Inculturation means that when Christianity comes to a culture, it's like a seed that gets planted and it takes root in the soil. So it's not just a transplant, like a plant that gets picked up and transplanted, but it's a seed that gets buried in the soil, and it itself has to sprout and then grow in that particular setting. So when we talk about inculturation and the Days of the Dead, what we're saying is that those customs are uniquely and authentically Mexican. They're from that particular cultural milieu. Now, as I said, within Mexico, traditions will vary from state to state or even within states. And when we were in Oaxaca, they're considered different regions. So there are 8 different regions in Oaxaca, and there are big differences across the different regions. Also in Central America and the US, there are some differences. So some of these things may vary, but let's hear from you and hear from the group here. What are some of the symbols that you associate with the Days of the Dead? Some of the things that come to your mind that you would expect to see or experience in Days of the Dead? Flowers, excellent, great, flowers.
And also it's fresh flowers and paper flowers.
Fresh flowers and paper flowers, yes.
And specifically marigolds.
Specifically marigolds. Thank you. Cempasúchil in Spanish.
Candles.
Candles, excellent. Yes, candles, probably one for each soul, at least. Anything else?
Portrait or pictures,
Photos, portraits of our loved ones,
things that they love.
things that they enjoyed during their lifetime. Okay, can you think of some examples that you'd want to say?
I was just, maybe that's what I was thinking about the altar at Giselle's, which has a lot of tequila.
Tequila.
And some cigarettes, but I would think, candy.
Tequila, cigarettes.
Cigarettes and dish, and
And their favorite dish, right?
favorite dish.
Favorite
option.
foods, favorite dish.
And,
Good.
yeah,
Okay. Anything else?
maybe toys, whatever.
Toys for a child, yes.
The
Yes.
sugar skulls.
The sugar skulls, the little calaveras.
Mhm.
Good, excellent, okay.
Muerto.
Pan de Muerto, okay.
And it's important because the pan de muerto has the bones.
Brave the
Okay.
bones. Good.
But there's also
Excellent.
the ones that have like the little figure,
The little face.
face, I guess that's a Virgin Mary, I don't know.
No, okay, yep, it could be anyone just representing the person who's gone.
I learned the hard way, that's not edible. I thought it was.
Good, excellent, okay. Any last things to point out?
Water. Yesterday,
Water.
I was reading it in one of our authors.
Mhm.
It's explaining step by step how we can build
Yeah.
an altar, and it's water. It's important.
Water should always be on the altar. Yes, definitely.
Oh, that
Yeah,
is-
and when you do a novenario de difunto,
Mhm.
usually people will put a glass of water. Yeah, good, okay. All right, well, you've made my work easy to go through the list. This is a list of the different traditions that, when I give this explanation, this comes from materials that were prepared by the Archdiocese of Oaxaca. So they really worked a lot in indigenous pastoral, and they actually had a whole office dedicated. It's called Floricanto, Flower and Song. That's for developing the indigenous practice of Catholicism. So here are the different things that they brought up. Cempasúchil, like we said, the marigold. When you just look at it, don't you feel like cheerful? Doesn't it just cheer you up? It's bright and it's colorful and it has that fragrance, that smell. As soon as you smell marigold, it makes you think of the days of the dead. For the indigenous people, it was always the flower that was offered for the dead. So it's used to decorate home altars and graveyards and really any place that you see a Days of the Dead display. Incense, especially copal. Copal is a very specific resin that was used for centuries by indigenous peoples for sacrifices and for religious rites. And the smoke rises from the incense just like the soul rises to take its journey to the land of the dead. Pan de Muerto we talked about, and it's baked only at this time of year, so that makes it special. And it's made with yeast. You know, in Mexico, traditionally, especially in poorer communities, bread was something that you only got once in a great while, because of course the staple of life is corn. So if you think about the process of making pan de muerto, you have to use yeast. Yeast was not commonly used, and yeast, that whole process of fermentation, it makes the dough, the masa, it makes it rise or come back to life. So there's a symbolism there for the pan de muerto. We mentioned how there's like little shapes, the dough is shaped into bones that are on the top that get baked in. And the faces, we mentioned, the little faces made out of flour and that are painted. Also, pan de muerto many times has seeds, ajonjolí, right? Seeds that represent new life. Now let's talk about the altars a little more, the altars that you can find in family homes or even in schools or places of work, so very similar to what people will experience when they go around in Poughkeepsie visiting the altars. It's a very intimate form of spiritual expression, and it's fun also, so it's serious and playful at the same time. And they are meant to receive the dead. So the idea is that the altar is where the souls, when they come to visit, they will come to the altar, and that is where the family or the community is receiving them. Oftentimes, there'll be a trail of cempasúchil petals, the flower petals, that make a little trail. So a trail leading up to the altar from either the street or the doorway to lead the soul toward the altar. Then there are the different foods. And it's believed that the soul will consume the essence of the food, not eating the food itself, but consuming its essence. This food itself will be left on the altar. You'll see a lot of times you'll see fruit. Margarita, did we put fruit on the altar here in the lobby?
Yes, okay.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. What's the difference between fruit and vegetable? Fruit carries the seed within it, doesn't it? If you think about fruit, it carries its own seed. So just like how we carry the seed of our own mortality within us, someday we're all going to be there, right? So we carry that seed in us, but there's new life in that as well, okay? So fruit, very commonly put on the altar. Also, you can say that, you know, our loved ones, they're like the seeds that we carry in our hearts, because we carry them with us now, wherever we are. Tamales, who could have muertos without tamales, right? I saw tamales on the altar. Interestingly, in Oaxaca, they pointed out that they eat a lot of, interestingly, winged animals, like chicken, turkey, and so those, because they are winged, they represent the union between earth and sky. So they're animals that maybe a turkey doesn't actually fly, at least not very far, but they do have wings, so there's that connection between the earth and the sky. In many places, commonly, the altar has at least some shape of an arco, an arch, so that it would be encircling from the earth up to the sky and then back down to the earth. That's very common in a lot of places. You have to have the carrizo, the branches that are very pliable that you can then make into an arc. I think it's called an arc, right? Yeah. We mentioned the glass of water, just in case the soul gets thirsty on its journey, right? Of course, as Christians, water always reminds us of our baptism, right? Candles, one for each person, and we remember the Cirio Pascual, the Paschal candle, Christ being light, and then each one of us and our souls being in connection with that. We mentioned the things that people like, even if it's tequila, or maybe they prefer mezcal, or maybe they prefer a Corona, whatever they like, put it on the altar. And if they like all of them, put them all on the altar. We mentioned the children and how if there was a child that has been lost, then on October 31st, that's the night when the angelitos, because they didn't have sin, so it's believed that they went straight to heaven, and they're the angels. So if you see a toy or something like that on the altar, that would be the explanation for that. Okay. Just to finish up, I'll point out I think what I would like to do is to show you these photos, because we just have a couple of minutes left. So I know that I'll be aware to also show this into the camera. This is a book that I really enjoy with photographs by John Greenlay. It's called The Days of the Dead. So here, it's a lovely photo of the cempasúchil, the marigolds. And here's some really fun ones. So here's a cowboy, a skeleton cowboy. These are the calacas. Skeleton cowboy riding a horse. A drummer and a judge, and remember I talked about the dentist. So sitting in the dentist chair. So we're laughing, right?
Yes.
So this is showing us something of the personality of the Days of the Dead, because it cheers us up, it makes us laugh. Here are some of the sweets,
Oh,
the calaveras, different sugar skulls and sweet breads and sweet things. Yes, and if you look really closely, there are even some coffins with little figures in them made out of sugar. Okay, now here would be a family altar. There's fruit, there's things of Coca-Cola, flowers, candles, photographs. So that might be an example of something in someone's home. Chocolate, yes,
yeah.
good.
Yeah. Can I ask some questions?
Yes.
So what happens with the food?
Well, the food now, it's gonna sit there for a couple of days. So some of the food will not be eaten if it's been out for a long time, but it can be eaten. Just that some people say that it will no longer have nutritional value, that the essence has already been consumed. It's not so important. What's important is just to share it with the souls. Yeah. Other questions or?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would like to know what is the difference between the Calacas and the Catrinas?
Oh, the Katrina. Okay, good. So the Katrina is a Calaca, and the Katrina that tradition was started by Jose Guadalupe Posada, who was a caricaturist and artist about 100 years ago. Okay, and so the Katrina, who people would identify with the Days of the Dead, is the skeleton dressed like an elegant lady. She has kind of a floppy hat with flowers, and she has a fancy old-fashioned dress on. And Jose Guadalupe Posada, he actually did that as a satire because he was kind of poking fun. He was poking fun at how some people thought that they were better than others, but the point is that the rich, the poor, we're all gonna die. So in death, there's a great equalizer.
Yes.
And that is the origin of the Katrina. It was done as a satire, kind of poking fun at the higher class people who didn't want to associate themselves with the commoners. Yeah, so there's definitely a tradition of satire in the Posadas, in Los Días de los Muertos. I said Posadas because his last name is Posada. So that reminds me of, yes. But there's a tradition of versos, of little short poems that people in some places will come up with, and the big street fairs that are very exuberant and going out in a parade, and so there are a lot of also very lively, let's say, lively traditions. But I'd like to close with this tradition, which is the visit to the graveyard. And this photo was taken in the state of Morelos, just outside of Cuernavaca. And this shows how the whole community goes out to the graveyard and they bring candles, they'll be singing. The priest would say mass there, probably at sundown. They bring something to eat, some pan de muerto, some hot chocolate, maybe some tamales, and they will do some vigil. They'll stay and just remember their loved ones. Probably during the day they went and cleaned up the grave, maybe swept, maybe repainted, did some weeding, preparing for that night vigil. So you see how it's just a very peaceful and very community-oriented time. Yes. Okay.
I find it very interesting that the church is very involved in Mexico, because I've had two experiences in California and Nevada. In California 1 year, the priest held off the mass as long as he could because he didn't want the Aztec dancers dancing.
Oh, that's
so
unfortunate.
He kept holding off. He kept saying, "Oh no, it's not time." And by the time it was time, it was too dark to see the dancers.
Oh, okay.
And then in Las Vegas, I think for 2 years we got the church to let us do the celebration there, and then it has been for almost the last 18 years out of community center. But it was much harder to get, for the church to. They just, it's a pagan thing.
Right. Well, actually Maggie and I, back in the day, we started the Aztec, we helped with the community to start December 12 celebrations in Newburgh to start the Aztec dancers during the Mass inside of the building. So I think that you'll find that there are different attitudes in different places, but there's definitely a sense of, you know, the fuzzy line between religion and culture and what is official and what is popular religion that's practiced by the people. So yes, definitely there's a lot of murky
Right.
ground.
I mean, I would definitely, this was in Sacramento, California, and I would definitely say, since I've been on the East Coast since 2002, that almost all the Aztec dancing I've seen has been not in the church, it's been on church grounds. Maybe not exactly in the church
Right,
itself,
right.
it's always been on church grounds, you know,
Yes,
so it's
yes,
different.
yes. Yeah, a lot of room to explore there with that conversation. Yes, yes. Well, we're out of time, so I want to thank everyone for coming and for listening and participating.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful
thank you, thank you.
Is there a break?
So thank you so much. So our next presentation is going to be in English and. No, I'm sorry. So, thank you. Yes, our next presentation is going to be in Spanish, and we are going to start at 3:30. So thank you so much.